先生、今、sorry in Japanese。先生、今、送ると、多分、後から人がもし入ってきたときには、受け取れないんだと思うんですよ。
ああ、わかった。うん。じゃあ、ちょっと後でやったらいいね。OK。So maybe we better to, not yet 8 a.m.
I have to ask one thing about YouTube to the operator. I mean, is the chat is open on YouTube? Excuse me?
The chat should be open. Just try.
Okay, but I just wonder that if we can check YouTube while
Yes,
we
yes.
are chatting on Zoom. So, but how about the other speakers? Also, they are checking both chat in Zoom and on YouTube. They are checking both sides. You know that? I mean, the speakers themselves have to check both chats window.
Well, anyway, it's
Yes.
8 a.m. in Moscow time, and it's 2 p.m. 14:00 in Japan. And we start now this online symposium. And first, I have to say sorry that we cannot speak Russian. So we have to rely on English. So sorry for our poor English, but anyhow, we have to rely on English. And also, I have to say that the allocated time is 3 hours, but maybe we stop at about 2 hours. My plan is to make a presentation each for 20 minutes for speakers. And well, the problem is that I thought asking someone in the United States as discussant, but it's the mid-time, more than that in the States, so it becomes impossible. So there's no discussant. So if some audience have some kindness to talk about our presentation, please do that.
Сейчас 8 часов утра московское время, 2 часа в Японии. И, к сожалению, ведущий извиняется, что все будет вестись на английском языке. Вот, это будут доклады. Вот, 20 минут доклад, и после этого будет время для дискуссии. Поэтому все приглашаются для того, чтобы задавать вопросы.
Just check if you now seems that you did the simultaneous translation of what I spoke. Do you continue to that, or is that just for some kind of the what can I say, just as notice or something like that, only notice or something like that, or do you continue translating all what I'm speaking?
Не знаю, это надо тогда останавливать его, потому что если сейчас опять пойдет длинный, я думаю, потому что это...
Okay. Anyhow, I have
So
to
yes,
start.
maybe after each report, the translator will give you just a short summary of what was it about. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Hi everyone. I'm Kiyotaka Miyazaki. I'm the Professor Emeritus, Faculty of Human Sciences, Waseda University, Japan. I organized this online symposium, and the title is, "What does Bakhtin's view on dialogical author suggest on the way of dialogical teachers?"
Меня зовут Киотаки Миядзаки, я из университета Васеда, и я хотел бы сегодня провести этот симпозиум на тему о том, как бахтинские идеи диалогизма работают в практике преподавания, в практике учителя.
This symposium examines the ways of being of the dialogical teacher and the therapist by analyzing the Japanese education and caring practices, which we believe dialogic in the sense of Bakhtin, and by relating these analyses to Bakhtin's discussion of the dialogical author.
Наше сегодняшнее заседание будет посвящено той практике, которая сложилась в Японии и которая касается проблем диалогизма и изучения проблем диалогизма применительно к практике преподавания.
Bakhtin's problems of Dostoevsky's poetics started substantially from the discussion on the authorship, suggesting the importance of the dialogical authorship for the works, novels, to be dialogic. In it, he wrote, for example, an enormous and intense dialogic activity is demanded of the author of a polyphonic novel. As soon as this activity seconds, the characters begin to congeal. They become mere things, and the monologically formed chunks of life appear in the novel. So the novels become unfinalized and indecisive dialogical being only when the author becomes the dialogic being.
И при этом уважаемый спикер говорит, что необходимо опираться на идеи Бахтина, которые посвящены проблемам полифонии романа. Существует как бы два предела разговора в романе, наррации в романе. Это полифонический предел и монологический предел. И, конечно же, преподавание, оно стремится к этому полифоническому диалогическому авторству, да, звучанию многих голосов.
In the education and caring activities, on the other hand, we believe that education and care become dialogic only when the teacher and the therapist become the dialogic being. It should be noted that our belief comes not from any theoretical influence, but based on our encounter with some Japanese practitioners and their practices of education and caring.
И когда мы говорим о диалоге, о диалогическом бытие человека, о диалогическом бытие преподавателя, мы должны опираться не на какую-то теорию, мы должны опираться на реальную встречу с практикующими учителями, преподавателями.
Though their views and practices have been developing not from some theories, but from their own practices, we found out the similarities between their views and their ways of being, and Bakhtin's thought on dialogue and the dialogic way of being of the author. So we believe it productive to organize the dialogue between the Japanese educational caring practitioner's view and Bakhtin's view. Not only the practitioner's view can be enriched by Bakhtin's theoretical view, but also the practitioner's view can provide many hints for Bakhtin's view to develop. This is why we organized a symposium in this conference.
Мы хотим сказать о сходстве диалогических идей Бахтина о том, как человек является автором и тех идей, которые предлагают нам практикующие педагоги. Собственно говоря, мы надеемся на продуктивный диалог между практикующими педагогами и той теорией, которую предложил Бахтин, и мы полагаем, что такой подход позволит нам обогатить не только саму практику преподавания, в которую войдут идеи Бахтина, но также обогатить и теоретические идеи бахтинологии при помощи вот тех каких-то идей, которые возникают в реальном преподавании, в реальной практике.
Our starting point is Baftin's view that dialogue also plays two roles. One from the outside, creating the arena of the dialogue. The other participating in the dialogue himself. So do the dialogue teachers. In this symposium, four presentators focus on activities of the teacher and the therapist, mainly as the participant. First, Miyazaki will examine on the nature of the question and the answer in the dialogue and the dialogue lesson, and the teacher's work as the listeners to students' hidden questions. Next, Satake will examine how the teacher learned about the lesson and its teaching material, focusing on the simulated lesson of some Japanese elementary school teachers. Third, Noguchi will examine how the early childhood education teacher interact with preschool kids dialogically. Finally, Onodera will examine how the occupational therapist listen to the voices of elderly of dementia.
Мы говорим сегодня о том, что автор играет две роли. Одну роль он играет как бы изнутри, другую роль извне. Извне он организует как бы свой диалог, свой текст. И извне он является непосредственным участником всех событий, которые при этом происходят. Вот. Сегодня у нас 4, то есть сегодня у нас выступающие спикеры, которые будут, в общем-то, в таком режиме, диалогическом режиме, говорить о различных проблемах, в частности, о роли диалогического автора в проблеме терапии, о воспитателях детского сада как сотворцах творческого мира, о том, как нужно учиться быть диалогичным. Вот, и все эти вопросы, в том числе и скрытые вопросы, которые предполагают, в данном случае исходят от обучающихся, будут сегодня рассмотрены на материалах Японии.
As I said, we are planning for each presenter about 20 minutes. And as I said, I couldn't ask my colleagues in the States, in the United States, to work as a discussant. There's no discussant in this symposium. So if the floor kindly give the comment on our presentation, it's very useful. So from now on, we are starting our own presentations. And first, I will do my presentation. And moderator, thank you for the simultaneous translation. But after that, maybe it's not. It takes a little bit time to translate all the presentations. So maybe it's better for us to speak the whole presentation, and then, if you possible, you summarize in Russian after our presentation, each presentation ends. Okay?
Okay, so just I'll translate it first. Okay. Итак, сегодня у нас 4 выступающих, я выступаю первым. У каждого выступающего будет 20 минут для того, чтобы высказать свою точку зрения. Поскольку сам этот режим не совсем диалогичное высказывание, мы очень-очень сильно надеемся, что у всех слушающих будут какие-то комментарии, вопросы, и, в общем-то, мы перейдем в режим диалога. Поскольку переводить после каждого абзаца это непродуктивно и занимает много времени, поэтому мы предлагаем в конце каждого выступления сделать краткую выжимку из того, что было сказано, и, в общем-то, сделать такой перевод в конце после каждого выступления. Yes, yes, that's a good idea.
Thank you. And I sent my own paper, not exactly what I talk here, because it's a little bit long for me to speak all of my prepared paper here. But anyhow, I send you by a chat function my paper, Baftin Conference 17 Miyazaki. So please refer to that one. Anyhow, I will start. Wait a second.
И у нас есть, значит, в чате я вам выслал, должна быть презентация, текст, точнее, да, есть?
Да, есть.
Да, текст, yes, we have this text, okay. У нас есть текст, поэтому для тех, кто хочет, может обратиться туда, хотя, конечно же, я не буду говорить полностью все, что сказано там в виде текста, я, конечно, мое выступление будет несколько отличаться от того, что там есть.
Can you see my PowerPoint?
Yes,
okay.
You can see your screen.
Thank you. My title, Teacher as the Listener to Student Questions. Here I deal with these problems. I believe that the school lesson becomes dialogic when the teacher can listen to students' questions. In this presentation, I'll examine this view using the view and practices of the Japanese educational practitioners and Bachtin's view on the dialogue author. To analyze and develop their view, however, we have to re-examine the nature of the question and the answer, and the Bachtin's view on the question and the answer, about which I talked in the previous conference of this conference in 2017, is a very useful starting point. So I'll start first about that. Bachtin referred to the issue of the question and the answer, at least in two places, as far as I checked. One is in the response to a question from Novi Mill, and this is about a question, this deals about a question in the context of so-called cross-cultural understanding. The other is a very short excerpt in the methodology for the human sciences, of which I'll focus on here. This is a very short two-paragraph excerpt, and the first paragraph of that. He wrote, questions and answers are not logical relations, categories. They cannot be placed in one consciousness, unified and closed in itself. Any response gives rise to a new question. Question and answer presuppose mutual outsideness. If an answer does not give rise to a new question from itself, it falls out of the dialogue and enters systemic cognition, which is essentially impersonal. In short, he says that the question and answer are not interlogical relations in the dialogue, and because of this, new question arises in the dialogue. So what does it mean that the question and the answer are in the logical relation? I think this first, whether the answer to the question is correct or not is determined logically. Second, the questioner and the answerer are in the same logical systemic cognition, so that they share the criterion of the correctness, in principle at least. So they are not in the dialogical relation, but in the monologic world in which one correct answer dominates. As I don't have much time to discuss it, I just point out that the so-called theories of augmentation are monologic, as they think that the question and the answer should be in the logical relations. Then, what does it mean, not in the logical relations? I think so. I think this. The answer deviates from what the question requires logically. The answer is no longer classified correct or wrong logically. The answerer understands the question differently from the questioner's intention. So, new question arises in the answerer, even if the answerer's new question is about the same problematic situation due its term to the questioner's question. Then why is the deviance from the logical relation between the question and the answer created? Bakhtin's thought is suggested in the next paragraph of the previous quotation. He wrote, the various chronotopes of the questioner and the answerer, and the various semantic words, I and other. The questioner and the answerer are living. The deviance comes from the fact that the questioner and the answerer are living in the different chronotopes and the semantic world. The questioner and the answerer understand the topic differently from their unique chronotope and the semantic world. So the meaning of the same question becomes different between the questioner and the answerer. So the new question is created in the answerer. Now let's now turn to the educational views and practices. Though Bakhtin's comment on the question is really creative, it is too short for us to understand clearly the work of question in the dialogue, even if we count on his essay on the question in the cross-cultural understanding. To make clear the work of question in the dialogue, I'll analyze dialogic pedagogical thought developed by some Japanese educational practitioners. Though having been developing in the educational practice independently from any theoretical ideas, Bakhtinian or not, the content of the view corresponds well to Bakhtin's view on this question. Among multiple practitioners who are developing similar views, I'll introduce a retired ex-elementary school principal, Yukio Tsukamoto, whose view on the question and the answer is similar to Bakhtin's view on the question and the answer. Tsukamoto wrote this. Teachers asked the question has its expected answer. However, the asked question is possibly polysemous and can imply various other questions. Child interprets teachers asked questions, chose one among many possible implied questions as his own, and answers to it. Sometimes, child's chosen question is different from the teacher's intended one. In that case, the answer of the child is of the intended answer of the teacher, and it is thought wrong by the teacher. However, if the answer of the child can be traced back to the child's question which brought the answer, the teacher can be aware of the new view about the learning topic hidden in the wrong answer of the child, and can connect that view to the flow of the learning in the lesson. Then the teacher and the child become the inquirer of the same question. Here, he focused on the wrong answer to the teacher's question as a typical example of the discrepancy between the teacher's question and the student's answer. The wrong answer is wrong in the sense that it is not correct nor reasonable from the teacher's intention. In the wrong answer, however, hides the student's question to which the student's answer is reasonable and correct. The student's question hidden in the student's answer is the result of the student's unique understanding of the teacher's original question, so that it is different from the teacher's one and new and unique. Here I want to show one example, but in this occasion, as time limit, I'll take an example not from the actual class, but of the imaginary one, based on the research of the so-called misconception studied in the science education and the cognitive science. This is a famous example of misconception studied for years in the field. It's sometimes called coin toss problem. The question is, imagine you toss the coin straight up and coin is still moving upward. Which force or forces is or are acting on the coin? And typically there are three alternatives. A, one force acting upward. B, force acting upward and downward. But when coin keeps moving upward, the upward force is stronger than the down force. And C is that only the down force is working. Which do you think the correct one? Of course, this is a rather simple physics problem. The correct answer is C, only the down force working. But at the study for long years keeps showing many people, even the elementary physics course student, keeps answers B. Now, answer C is correct because coin keeps moving upward without the upward force because of the law of inertia, or the Newton's first law. And B is, of course, incorrect scientifically. But the important thing that it's incorrect scientifically, it is kind of comprehensible, understandable. Why? The law of inertia presupposes the ideal world in which there is no friction, no resistance at all. The people don't experience this ideal world, but only think it, have to think about it, have to imagine it. On the other hand, people live in the real world in which there are resistances and frictions. So uniform motion cannot continue without keeping force working on the object. So it's very natural for many people to select B or A instead of C. Now let me use the term question. For the people who answered C, the question was, which force or forces is or are acting on the coin moving upward, with the implicit presupposition that the world in which this event occurs is the ideal world. For the people who answered B or A, the question was, which force or forces is or are acting on the coin moving upward, with the implicit presupposition that the world in which this event occurs is the real world with the frictions and resistances. In this real world, it is quite correct that the upward force is necessary for the object keeps moving. So B is correct answer to the question many people would have. In other words, they who answered C and B or A have different questions. Now, imagine that if you organize a lesson on this misconception, there are two possible ways. One way is to treat the answer B and A as the wrong answer. Scientifically, it's wrong answer. And teach the correct thought in some way. Maybe direct lesson or discussion any way. In this case, the students are expected to have an unified systemic cognition of the Newtonian physics, or the one correct answer. It results the monologic lesson. Another way is to approve that answer B and A are reasonable and find out the student's implicit question behind the answer and develop and explore the question. Students and the teacher can explore collaboratively the strange nature of the ideal world, which is presupposed by Newtonian physics. Or they can also explore how the resistances and frictions in the real world affect the movement of objects in the real world. This imaginary case results the dialogue lesson in the sense that thoughts of every people, including one who has the scientifically wrong answer, are not excluded from the development of the lesson. Now we go back again, but why the discrepancy created? Bakhtin argued that the deviance from the logical relation between the question and the answer, and hence the creation of a new question, is caused by the fact that the chronotypes of the questioner and the answer are different. This view can be elaborated by using philosopher Gadamer's concept of the horizon of the question. Gadamer wrote, "To ask a question means to bring into the open. The openness of a question is not boundless. It is limited by the horizon of the question. A question that lacks this horizon is, so to speak, floating. It becomes a question only when its fluid indeterminacy is concretized in a specific this or that. It implies explicit establishing of presuppositions in terms of which can be seen what still remains open." Here I'll extend Gadamer's concept using my own words. For me, the horizon of the question is the relevant knowledge people have surrounding the unknown or the openness. The relevant knowledge relating to the unknown determines the sense of the question and the direction of exploring the answer. Now, the term of the sense of the question and the direction is the terms Gadamer uses. So when two have the different knowledge surrounding the unknown, they have different questions. That is, questions with different senses and directions, even if two have the same unknown. The discrepancy emerges consequently. How about the cases of the coin toss? The answer C, or scientifically correct answer. The question should be understood on the horizon that the event happens in the special world in which there is no friction nor resistance. So which forces on the coin the question or science's question is interpreted in this way. On the contrary, when someone answered the so-called scientifically wrong B or A, the question should be understood on the horizon that the event happened in the real world, in which there are friction and resistance. So both parties differently understand the world surrounding the unknown, or what force acting on the coin. Here we should emphasize that every people have their own unique knowledge on the world, and even in the same person, the knowledge on the world is always changing, so that it is unique, not only between person, but within person. This is because people's knowledge on the world is the precipitate of one's experiencing the world through one's life. Of course, there are always some degree of commonalities. People who answer B to the coin toss problem, for example, have the same horizon as much as it is describable. Their knowledge is describable as the real world in which there are frictions and resistances. However, the concrete experience of a friction and resistance must be unique to each person, so the detail of the horizon depends on each person. Here we have to turn to the teacher's work as the listener to the student's questions. The people's uniqueness of knowledge and experience is the basis for the class lesson to be dialogic. When people with different knowledge background encounter the lesson, the discrepancy of question emerges. However, it is difficult for students to get notice of their own uniqueness, in particular their unique question hidden in their answer to the teacher's question. Instead, the students tend to think that his answer is wrong, even when he generated a unique question from the teacher's original question. So here comes the teacher's turn. It's up to the teacher if he can listen to the students' hidden question in their answers. Teacher's way of listening of the student's response determines if the class becomes dialogic or monologic. When the student's apparently wrong response is taken for the teacher the wrong answer, the class will be monologic, in which the student is forced to understand the teacher's correct answer in some form. On the other hand, when the teacher can identify the student's unique question in his seemingly wrong answer, student and the teacher can share the question and explore collaboratively the question. The class becomes dialogic. How can the teacher discover the hidden question in the student's apparently wrong question? It is not easy for the teacher to discover the hidden question in the student's apparently wrong answers. This not only requires the teacher's examining and interpreting of students' ideas, but also reflecting on his own questions. To prepare for this work, the teacher should learn about the learning material of the students authentically before the class lesson. This work is called Kyōzai Kaishaku, interpreting the teaching material by some Japanese practitioners. In this work, the teacher should explore the learning material from many directions and create many questions as possible. In the next presentation, Satake will analyze the teacher's simulated lesson, and the part of which the teacher do it is this Kyōzai Kaishaku, in this case, collaboratively. The teacher's learning of the students' learning material before the class is not the only chance for the teacher to learn of the learning material. Discovering the hidden question in the student's response is another chance for the teacher to learn of the learning material, as the student's unique question shows the new direction of exploring the learning material, which is new and different from the teacher's. In this sense, The teacher is the learner who learns about the learning material with the equal right vis-a-vis the truth of the learning material, as Bakhtin said in his Problems of Dostoevsky. The teacher who can listen to the student question becomes the dialogue being in the Bakhtian sense. Thank you. This is the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much. Мы благодарим профессора Киотаки Миядзаки за очень интересное выступление. И если есть возможность, переводчик, сделать очень-очень краткое, но такое подробное, да, выдержки из сообщения. And now I ask the interpreter to make a summary of your speech, short summary of your speech. Okay?
Да, значит, профессор Миядзаки построил свое выступление у него оно состоит у него из четырех частей, и кратко по каждой части я постараюсь воспроизвести то, что он предлагает осмыслить. Значит, первый концепт, который он вводит, или идея, это отход от логики в отношениях между вопросом и ответом. Здесь он опирается на Бахтина и приводит цитаты следующего рода.
Нет, ну мы знаем, цитаты, просто вы коротко скажите, там, раз, там, два, три, четыре, в течение там 2 минут, да, вот как-то так, максимум минуты.
То есть не зачитывать, да? Как?
Ну просто суть скажите, не надо ничего зачитывать.
Значит, вопросы,
все мы видели, знаем.
Да, вопросы и ответы, они не являются логическими категориями или отношениями, и они не могут быть, как бы уместиться в одном сознании, едином и закрытом в себе. И любые ответы, они порождают новый, или любой ответ порождает новый вопрос. Вопрос и ответ предполагают взаимную вненаходимость. Если ответ не вызывает новый вопрос сам по себе, да, то он выпадает из диалога и как бы входит уже в область системного познания, что является крайне межперсональным. И в связи с этим он также останавливается на понятии хронотопа, также цитируя Бахтина, что различные хронотопы того, кто спрашивает, и того, кто отвечает, и различные семантические миры, то есть я и другой. И с этой точки зрения третье сознание и этот нейтральный мир, где все взаимозаменяемо, вопрос и ответ становятся неизбежно деперсонифицированными. Если кратко, то это первая часть его выступления. То есть вот это вот как... Ну, здесь, если можно суммировать, то что отход, вот этот вот понятие отхода или отклонения, оно создает креативное понимание мира. Вот, если так можно сформулировать. Далее, во второй части он переходит уже непосредственно к практике применения идей Бахтина, идей диалогичности. Наверное, показательна вот эта вот схема с монетами, подбрасыванием жребия, определением при помощи монет. И он говорит, что Вообразите, что когда вы подбрасываете монету, она движется вверх, да? И какие силы в этот момент действуют на эту монету. И возникают 3 альтернативных ответа, в которых правильный это вариант С. Но многие люди выбирают Б, считают, что неправильный ответ как раз С. Многие люди как раз выбирают Б, то есть Б неправильный ответ. С это правильный ответ, поскольку монета продолжает двигаться вверх, и как только ее подбросили, да, но она теряет скорость и начинает на нее действовать сила, которая тянет ее вниз, или гравитация. И после этого она начинает падать. Монета двигается вверх без силы, которая действует вверх, потому что в результате первого закона Ньютона или закона инерции. И сложность проблемы заключается в том, что в понимании вот этого закона инерции многие люди должны учить или получить знания обязательного образования, то есть это базовые законы, но они не могут использовать их даже в таком простом примере. Третья часть. Здесь профессор Миязаки опирается на, цитирует Годомера и его понятие «горизонт вопроса». Он говорит, вернее, цитируя, когда мы задаем вопрос, это означает что-то как бы открыть или открыть что-то. Открытость этого вопроса, она не является чем-то ограниченным, она безгранична. И то есть открытость ограничена только горизонтом вопроса. И вопрос, у которого нет горизонта, он как бы он отводит нас или он уводящий. Да. Он становится вопросом только когда когда его текучая интердетерминированность, она конкретизируется в специфическом «этот» или «тот». И это предполагает такое явное установление как бы полагание каких-то установок. И последняя часть — это то, что преподаватель, учитель, как диалогическое существо, он основной, он является основной сущностью в диалогическом классе. Это каким образом это понимать? Он должен слушать вопросы то есть быть способным слушать, уметь услышать вопросы и узнавать, учиться от обучающегося.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Just I'm sorry for such a long summary, because there were many ideas in the presentation of Professor Miyazaki. So now, if there are some questions. I see that there are some questions. Just one moment. Just one moment. I don't see.
Yes.
I think Sergey Sandler wants to ask a question.
Thank you, first of all. Thanks for the talk, which is very interesting. I do have one pesky physics point and a related maybe defense of the traditional teacher's dialogism, partial defense, obviously. So the physics point is that friction and resistance actually, while the coin is going up, friction and resistance are also pushing it down. They're going against the direction of motion. Only when the coin starts falling back down do they push up, right? So answers A and B wouldn't still, unless I misunderstood the question, wouldn't still be correct according to traditional physics, at least, even in a world with friction and resistance. Although you can always find some forces working in all directions if you look closely enough. And as for what the hypothetical teacher does in this question, there is actually some dialogical work being put into trying to anticipate the students' potential misconceptions or ideas they're coming with and that the teacher wants to address in inventing the wrong answers, at least if a multiple choice question is done well, right? So this is already dialogical in some sense, even though the teacher still has the truth, right? Still has the correct answer. There is still the moment or the element, the aspect of trying to anticipate the learner's preconceptions and possible misconceptions, which is already some kind of dialogism on that level. And that also connects to what Bakhtin is saying, that every text is dialogical to some extent. Every utterance is dialogical to some extent. It doesn't have to be Dostoevsky's polyphonic novel to be dialogical. It's dialogical even if it tries to be monological, even if it fools itself, if the author fools himself or herself that they're engaged in monologue. They are engaged in dialogue whether they want it or not. So that's my question. Вы хотите, чтобы я заодно перевел вопрос на русский язык?
Если очень коротко.
Да. Значит, одна, так сказать, пределька по поводу физики, что трение и сопротивление воздуха, когда вот эта монета летит вверх, покуда она летит вверх, и трение сопротивления воздуха тоже ее на нее действует в направлении вниз, против направления движения. Так что с этой точки зрения вопрос, ответы А и Б не были бы правильны в любом случае. Но серьезней, в выборе, так сказать, неправильных, в кавычках неправильных, или действительно неправильных ответов, тоже есть определенный диалогизм, определенный диалог, потому что учитель пытается предсказать, предвосхитить, какие могут быть недопонимания, какие могут быть переведены из других мест представления учеников. Даже если учитель, так сказать, превозглашает одну правду, в этом смысле он, конечно, у нас не полифоник, как Достоевский, но все равно определенный уровень диалога там есть. Вообще, в любом высказывании есть диалог. Даже в самом монологичном монологе, сколько ни старайся, он все равно будет диалогичен. Хоть на каком-то уровне. Вот, это был мой вопрос, комментарий.
Спасибо. Thank you very much. Please switch on your microphone, Professor.
Thank you for the very interesting and stimulating questions. It's one for the issue of physics. The other is the definition or characterization of the term dialogue. Now, first about the issue of physics. As you said, B or A is, of course, scientifically not correct, of course. But still, it has some kind of reasonableness. If there is no friction, if there is friction, and in the real world, you have always pushed some force. So people tend to put this idea, even if the coin is going up, they think that it's moving, so there must be some force upward. And this is reasonable. And this reasonable is very important starting point for the class to be dialogic, using my term. Now I cannot remember the term, but before the days of Newton, this idea that things need some force always when it moves, the so-called scientific in those days. But anyhow, the second one is more important, and maybe the core or the nucleus of my point. It seems that if I am correct, you said there are three alternatives. So, and the people have takes the different options, standpoints. So if there is some discussion, there must be some dialogue. As far as I understand, many people take this position. And the general idea of the so-called dialogue pedagogy is to organize some kind of discussion. I don't know in the situation of Russia, but in Japan, the term active learning is very popular. And this activeness just means that people say something, people commit discussing, and that is active. Well, from my point of view, this discussion can be monologic or dialogic. And it depends on how the so-called wrong answer are treated. If in the discussion, the wrong answer can still have some used, or can I say their reasonableness is acknowledged, and the discussion starts from that reasonableness. For example, as I said, yeah, Newton's world of physics is very, very strange world in a sense. No friction, no resistance. It's very peculiar world. I should say that all the natural sciences presuppose such kind of ideal world, or you can say the model. And people tend to think that science describes the real world, but they sometimes forget that science describes world through the model. And to reach to that intuition or understanding, we have to use the wrong answer to approve the reasonableness, to find out what the questions are behind them. Then their dialogue will start. That's my idea. So if there's discussion, but discussion, what can I say, in sometimes assumed to end to the one correct answer with so-called, for example, evidence and something like that. For me, it's monologic. It's my answer.
Да, я очень коротко скажу, что профессор Миядзаки, отвечая на вопрос, говорит, что даже наличие какой-то дискуссии, активной дискуссии, еще не обозначает, что такая дискуссия будет диалогичной. То есть и дискуссия, и обмен какими-то репликами, он может быть как монологичным, так и диалогичным. И, в общем-то, он является диалогичным в том случае, если, в общем-то, предвосхищается этот ответ. Если есть какой-то один единственный ответ, который, в общем-то, заранее уже известен, то это будет не диалог, а монолог, даже если форма высказывания является дискуссионной, да, диалогичной. Okay, so maybe some more questions. I would like also to ask you just a small question about you're starting your conversation with Socratic dialogue, yes, method of Socratic dialogue. So what do you see what are the differences from your point of view between Socratic dialogue and the idea of Bakhtin? So are they qualitatively different, or it is just continuation of the ideas of Socrates? Я спрашиваю вопрос о разнице и сходстве между диалогическим методом Сократа и диалогическими идеями Бахтина.
This is a very, very important question. Difference between the Bakhtin's and the so-called Socratic way of dialogue or Socratic way of education. For me, Socrates asked, yes, but Socrates' question is just to, I can say, try to go towards the correct answer. Socrates tried to, how can I say, try to elaborate the some wrongness in people's beliefs. That's why he asks. Bakhtin's question is not that. Bakhtin's question, as I quoted in the quotation I used, think that the new question arises from the answer, and typical one is from the wrong answer. So wrong answer is not a starting point to the correct one, but starting point to the new different answer. So there's a very, very huge difference between the so-called Socratic dialogue and the Bakhtin's idea. That's my thought.
Thank you very much. Профессор Миядзаки сказал, что разница очень серьезная, и что Сократ в конце концов всегда подводит своих собеседников к какому-то правильному ответу, пытается убрать все неправильности в этом разговоре, а Бахтин, он, в общем-то, для него нет какого-то там единственного правильного ответа, потому что каждый вопрос порождает новые вопросы, новые ответы, новые вопросы. В общем-то, одного единственного, как у Сократа, ответа здесь нет. Okay, thank you very much. Maybe some other questions, or we should continue because we don't have time. Are there some more questions or not? Okay, please, Professor Miyazaki, you can continue. Yes, you
okay.
Can. Yes.
Then the next we'll go to the next presenter. We'll go to the next presenter, Satake. Satake-san, can you?
Hi.
Please.
Okay. Yes. Hi everyone. I'm Takaaki Satake, and I'm a graduate student of Hokkaido University. I shared my hand points using the chat. Okay.
Меня зовут Такааки Сатаки из университета Хоккайдо, студент, и я, в общем-то, в чате там сейчас передам.
My theme of the presentation is my theme of the presentation is teachers learning to be dialogic, a simulated lesson in the novelistic pedagogy. Today, I'd like to talk to you about the development of this simulated lesson based on the novelistic pedagogy and the teacher's experience in it. Outline. I've divided my presentation into 5 parts. First, I will talk about introduction. I will introduce the results and problems of previous research. Second, I will present the research question of my research. Third, I will explain the method of this research, which was done to qualify my research questions. Fourth, I will present the results of this study. And finally, I finish the presentation with conclusion. Due to the recent popularity of the lesson study theory, it is well known that teachers in Japan are conducting the lesson studies on a daily basis at various levels. According to Lewis, lesson study is conducted in a cycle of study, plan, teach, reflect. Study involves researching the teaching materials to be used in the lesson. Plan involves lesson planning for the lesson. Teach involves the lesson. And reflect involves reflecting on the lesson. In my research, we will focus on a simulated lesson, which were one of the specific means by which teachers collaborate with each other to conduct lesson studies before the class. One of the reasons for focusing on simulated lessons conducted among teachers is that EC points out that the way children learn and the way teachers learn are similar. In other words, if the way teachers learn in the simulated lesson is monologic, the way children learn in the lesson will also be monologic. If the way teachers learn in the simulated lesson is dialogic, the way children learn to will also be dialogic. In general, the simulated lessons are supposed to be a planned process. The purpose of this lesson is to refine the lesson plan for the actual lesson. In a simulated lesson that involves the prompt process, the endpoint and the process of the lesson to get there are set in advance. In this kind of lesson, the direction of the lesson becomes fixed because the goal is to have the children acquire a unified systematic cognition. Due to the above reasons, the class becomes monologic. On the other hand, Yukio Tsukamoto and his colleagues who advocate a dialogic pedagogy called novelistic pedagogy have developed a different kind of dialogic simulated lesson. The purpose of this simulated lesson is to inquire into new meanings about the teaching material. Miyazaki explains the novelistic pedagogy as follows. Novelistic pedagogy focuses on the triadic relation between students, teachers, and the topic of the lesson. The teacher discovers questions that are new to him or her in the teaching material and in the children's understanding of the teaching material, and presents them to the children. In doing so, children will also create a new understanding of the teaching material. When the teacher becomes the dialogic being, the lesson becomes dialogic. And the concept of questions are key to this process. Collingwood has been pointed out that behind every statement there is a complete corresponding question. Gadamer also points out that these questions have a certain direction. From these discussions, the word question does not refer only to the teacher's question or children's question, but also to the possibility of a specific inquiry about a certain subject that existed behind the teachers and children's speech. In a simulated lesson based on the novelistic pedagogy, unlike in a general simulated lesson, the reach of the lesson and the question inquired will change according to the ideas of the participants. In other words, the meaning of the teaching material is generated by the dialogue among the participants. In these simulated lessons, teachers have equal rights and influence each other's understanding of the teaching material. In this study, I set up the following two research questions about the simulated lessons based on the novelistic pedagogy. First, in a dialogic simulated lesson, how does the participants' inquiries progress? Second, what kind of experience do teachers in this simulated lesson? Next, I'd like to talk about research methods. In this research, I targeted upon Chiba Ibaraki Pedagogical Study Group, which is descended from Saito pedagogy, developed mainly by Kihak Saito. In this group, teachers share an ideal teaching image in which the teacher collaborates with the learners to inquire the subject matters. The subject of this research was the workshop held by this group in December 2020. There were 30 participants in the workshop. This study targets a simulated lesson on the teaching material, My Good Points in Moral Education. Research method. First, we focused it on the teacher's discourse in the simulated lesson. For that, I videotaped the simulated lesson held at the workshop. Next, all the sounds were verbatim. Based on the records, we analyzed the discourse. Second, we focused on the teacher's discourse after the simulated lesson. Like a simulated lesson, I videotaped the discourse held at the workshop. Next, all sounds were verbatim. Based on the records, the author analyzed the discourse. In Japan, moral education has been established as a national curriculum. It has a dedicated textbook, and the purpose of using the text is to have children discuss its contents. The values of developing individuality and being aware of one's own characteristics are set in advice in this text. Synopsis of the text is as follows. The main character of the story, I, is troubled by the fact that she has no good points. However, through various interactions, my friend Tomo-chan finds good point about me. My hands are warm, and I am kind to everyone. Next, results. Results 1 is progress of the inquiry in the simulated lesson. The discussion in the simulated lesson was developed by discovery of new questions. New questions arise from the gap in understanding among the participants, and new questions are connected to existing questions. As an example, I take the following two scenes. However, in the interest of time, I will skip the details. About the except one, Mr. B's argument is as follows. Mr. F read this part as if I was convinced of my good points, but I wasn't still convinced of my good points. He thinks that interacting with the other kids in the class had a big impact. Here, the gap between Mr. F's and Mr. B's interpretation of the sentence, my good point is that my hands are warm, is clear. The question found in this scene is, from this gap, the question, was I convinced of my own good points at the time of this sentence, is generated. Furthermore, this question is transformed into the question, when was the last time I was convinced of my good points? From these conversations, this simulated lesson inquires into the process of I becoming convinced of my good points. At the same time, the changes into my I's feelings during the process are also inquired into. Next, excerpt 2. In the interest of time, I will skip the details. About excerpt 2, Mr. E's argument in this scene is as follows. At first, I wasn't convinced that having warmed my hands was a good point about me. However, as I interacted with my friends, I became convinced that having warm hands was a good point about me. From this, I shed tears of satisfaction. Mr. B's counter-argument to Mr. E's argument in this scene is as follows. Based on the sentence, what should I do? I've lost all my good points. Mr. B pointed out that tears I shed were tears of loss. Mr. C's argument about this conflict is in this scene is as follows. He points out that both of their arguments have in common that the tears came because I was convinced of my own good points. He discovered a new question that exists in common behind the argument of both Mr. E and Mr. B. In other words, the question, what were the contents of the tears that I shed, was initially inquired. In addition, it became clear that the question, why did I shed tears, was also being inquired there. This connection connects to the process of I becoming convinced of my good points. This question is found out in excerpt 1. Next, result 2. About teachers' experience in simulated lesson. Narrative by Mr. C. Mr. C pointed out that in this simulated lesson, he was discovering the value of the teaching materials, rather than designing the lesson according to the predetermined value of the teaching materials. As indicated in result 1 above, in this simulated lesson, the teachers are not designing a lesson to convey the value of the teaching material to the children, but are collaboratively inquiry into the content of this teaching material. As mentioned, excerpt 1 and 2. In this simulated lesson, Mr. C was exploring the question behind the conflicting opinions. For example, in the tear issue, he initially inquired into the contents of tears I shed, but after his response, he changes his focus to the reason why I shed tears. These inquiries were connected to the inquiry of my process of being convinced of my good points and the change in my feelings. In this way, the discovery of new possibilities described here means discovering new questions about the teaching materials. The discovery of these questions has become an opportunity for teachers to open up his closed understanding. In other words, the gap in understanding and questions with other participants provide an opportunity to update one's own understanding. Also, as the word opinion open implies, the renewal of understanding here means not only the acquisition of new understanding, but also the re-examination of existing understanding. Next, a narrative by Mr. F. and Ms. G. The experience of freely interacting with others about what I thought about the teaching material is very interesting. I felt more willing to speak up because others were discovering new things about my ideas. When opposing interpretations are presented, exploring the possibilities of each interpretation rather than debating which is correct motivated them to participate in the simulated lesson. In other words, the fact that other participants give new value to one's interpretation, discovery of new questions, encourages fun and more active participation in the simulated lesson. The experience of participating in a simulated lesson in such lesson will help you image the position of the children who will dialogically participate in the lesson. I set up 2 research questions procedures to answer 2 main topics. First, the development of the simulated lesson in the novelistic pedagogy is a process of the development of questions. This simulated lesson is developed by discovering new questions behind each interpretation, rather than discussing which interpretation is more appreciated when opposing interpretations are presented. It became clear that the creation of new questions from the gap in each understanding is important for creative understanding in dialogue, as Bachtin pointed out. In such a simulated lesson, unlike in a monologic simulated lesson, the endpoint of the lesson depends on the progress of the inquiry in the lesson. In other words, it is a process of creatively updating one's understanding of the teaching material. Second, in these simulated lessons, the teachers dialogically inquiry into the value of teaching material and anticipate the children's dialogical participation in the actual lesson. Such experiences can contribute to teachers' deeper understanding of children's experiences in the actual lesson. In other words, the fact that teachers accept each other's idea in the simulated lessons can lead to a better understanding of the significance of children's dialogic participation in the lesson. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll give just a short summary of your presentation. Таатаки Сатаки говорит о романной педагогике, крупнейшим представителем которой является Киотаки Миядзаки, на примере урока стимуляции. И он говорит, что романная или новеллистическая педагогика, она основана на триадических отношениях между студентом, учителем и темой. Она нацелена на поиск новых вопросов, нового понимания. Вопросы не только актуальны, то есть вопросы не только актуальных, но и потенциальных вопросов, основаны на предугадывании, на антиципации. И значит, Таатаки Сатаки проводит такой разбор мастер-класса, который прошел в декабре прошлого года, мастер-класса по моральному воспитанию, и показал на этом примере, что новые вопросы возникают из неких разрывов в понимании, из диалога, из сотрудничества, они связываются с уже существующими вопросами. И даже используя стандартные программы и стандартные учебники, можно получить совершенно новый материал и как бы каждый урок будет абсолютно новым. И при этом не только ученики чему-то учатся, но и учитель получает, в общем-то, при этом тоже новое знание не меньше, чем его ученики. И Таатаки-Сатаки рассматривает нарративы разных участников мастер-класса, проводя анализ своего занятия, то есть описывает каждый участник, ну, основные участники описывают, в общем-то, свои впечатления от этого, и делается вывод, что вот эти вот новые открытия, диалог, они привели к несомненному повышению интереса к уроку, повышению его качества и получению новых знаний. Okay, thank you. Okay, now if you have questions, please, so who wants to ask questions? Mm-hmm.
Hello, can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much for very interesting talks until now. This is a very interesting symposium, so thank you for bringing this on. Yesterday, Mr. Mars, I think, I don't remember his first name, Mr. Mars said that the dialogic teaching would be for grown-ups and not for children. And I disagree very much with him. And as you show in your symposium, I think this is the way to work forward to make education more dialogic. There's this also worldwide. I'm sure you know philosophy with children, or P4C society. All over the world doing, I think, what you are doing, asking and developing the teacher's way of discover the questions. And my comment is that this is a very, very difficult task because we are, as teachers and as listeners and as human beings, taught in the monologic way. So to speak, from the when we were 2 years old, we were sitting at the table, and the grown-ups were asking us something. And I mean, this is an educational difficulty to train ourselves as teachers to think of this classroom in another way. And my experience is that it's also a very bodily experience, that you have to do something else with your body to stand out of the center and to listen. The first task is to listen. And that's very difficult for teachers because they are responsible and they are used to have the answers. So my question is, how do you work with teachers in your project? How do you work to develop the professional development? Because I'm sure you have the same experiences, that this is very, very difficult to do as a teacher. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, please.
Okay. Sorry, one more question. Pardon. Question one more time, please. Sorry.
Tina, can you please repeat in short the question? Yes.
Yes. Just that it's for both of you. How do you work with teachers to train this way of listening for questions instead of doing answers, making answers?
Okay, I'll translate it into Russian also. Как вы работаете с учителями для того, чтобы научить их выслушивать вопросы?
Sorry, in Japanese. 佐竹さん、わかりました？
いや、
質問の意図。
ちょっとうまくつ
つまり、
かめなかった。
聞くっていうことがすごく難しいわけで、教師にとってね。
はい。はい
そ。のために、あなた方のプロジェクトではどんなことをやってるのかっていうことで、まさにこのシミュレーテッドレッスンっていうのはそれなんだっていうことを答えると思うよ。So, sorry in Japanese. I somehow explain.
In our project, the simulated lesson is trained listening, making a questions itself. We collaborated, inquire into the new possibilities of teaching materials is to train listening in the actual class. Equal. So we discussed about the teaching materials, role by teacher and role by a role of children is not distinguished into divided. One we discussed it about the teaching material. One participants. So we have equal rights about teaching materials and influence each other's understanding. This is trained to listening, make listening children's answers in the actual lesson.
Okay, thank you.
Can I add something?
Yes, please.
Thank you very much.
As far your point is really the core, the nucleus of our not project. The term project are really bit off but anyhow, our kind of movement. Listening for the teacher is very difficult, and simulated lesson Satake explained is one occasion, but teachers in a sense train, but maybe the term experience is better. Experience the listening, and in the popular simulated lesson, it's just a kind of rehearsal or predetermined plan. But in this type of simulated lesson, it's actually kind of the collaborative study of the learning material. An important thing, as far as I understand the Satake's presentation, is that the teacher says something funny or wrong, but even in that funny response, some other teacher can find out a good thing. Oh, it seems that your argument is off the point, but actually there's such kind of a question. This kind of experience of can I say, listened to, maybe is the most important moment for the teacher to experience about the listening. So maybe they can have the feeling that, we can do that to the children. When children make something wrong, there must be something interesting. Of course, this is very difficult to find out in each case. Still, this simulated lesson as a kind of collaborative study of the teaching material give teachers to experience such experiences.
Thank you.
Very much.
Даже очень коротко скажу, что про образование учителей говорили про роли учителей, роли обучаемого, о том, что у всех у них должны быть равные права, должна быть постоянная дискуссия, и сложнее всего научить учителя слушать. Для этого нужны какого-то рода репетиции, для того, чтобы уметь выслушивать какие-то вещи. Даже неправильные ответы или просто какие-то шутки, они могут быть интересны, потому что они вызывают совершенно новые вопросы, дают новые ответы. То есть из всего, что звучит, из каждой реплики, можно вывести что-то совершенно новое. Thank you very much.
Maybe we go to the next presentation.
Yes, I think.
Okay. Then next presentation by Noguchi-san.
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Saki Noguchi. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at Meiji University. So I'll start my presentation. A research theme is kindergarten teacher as a collaborative creator of children's imaginable world. In early childhood education in Japan, what is necessary for the educational goal of proactive, interactive, and deep learning of children is being examined. Depicting the proactive of children is considered to be valuing children's play. Play means all activities that are based on children's interests. Early childhood education practice requires that children interact with various people and things through play, and the experience is enriched. In so-called children-centered education, the role of preschool teacher is positioned as possible. The role of the preschool teacher is focused on providing indirect assistance, such as forming physical, human environment and playable situations for the children to play. So this is called education by environment. So when children play, there is an aspect of exploring and creating an imaginative world, such as the world of pretend play, the world of pictures, books, and the world of sound production. The role of the preschool teacher is thought that assisting from the outside of the relationship between the children and the imaginative world, appropriating or verbalizing children's behavior or playing the role that the children want in pretend play. There is not much emphasis on how preschool teachers feel or think about the imaginative world itself. So, in this presentation, I will focus on issues such as the standing position of preschool teachers, that is, the way of preschool teachers being. I'll show the sort of understanding this problem using the idea of triadic relationship by Miyazaki. The dialogue between the children and the preschool teacher means that the children and the preschool teacher have equivalent rights to the imaginative world. Is it important for preschool teacher not only to understand the children themselves and the imaginative world through the children, but also to face the imaginative world directly and explore its possibilities with children? And isn't this the way of being of the dialogic teacher in the Bachtin sense, which is the agenda of this symposium? Based on the above, the following is a research question in this presentation. How does the preschool teacher experience and explore the children's imaginative world with them? Secondly, what is the way of dialogic preschool teacher being as a collaborative creator of children's imaginative world? In this presentation, I'll take up two cases from the practice in one Japanese kindergarten that gives suggestions on this point. This slide shows the methodology. Research site is one Japanese kindergarten whose curriculum focuses on imaginative play and art activity. Research activity is class activity and art workshop with artists at 5 years old class. Research method is observation surveys about activities in the class and art workshops were conducted. Target activity is making process of artwork and imaginative world was analyzed. This study has been carried out from 2012, and the survey has been conducted multiple times throughout the year, mainly in the art workshop in August. In the research site, activities are developed while imaginative play and art activities are interrelated. In April of the beginning of the year, and starting from that, imaginative play is developed while searching for interest in each class. Preschool teacher prepare picture books and picture books related to the theme, talk with children about them, enjoy interesting things together, and discover questions. And children and the teacher play in the imaginative world. In parallel with the imaginative world of the class being created by daily play, art workshops inviting professional artists was held 3 times from May to August. So here I will explain the characteristics of imaginative play and art. Both play and art are the works of creative imagination. The imaginative play is a play that becomes a law in the imaginative world. The imaginative world is constructed by discovering new meanings while performing in the imaginative world. As a related practice, play world focused on this point. In art activities, the imaginative world is constructed in the form of artwork while enjoying the making experience. And the activity deepens through the interaction between the making artwork and the imaginative world. In lecture media, art is used as an opportunity to deepen logical thinking such as science. In research site, creating an imaginative world through the accumulation of daily imaginative play and art activities. So in this presentation, based on this practice, I will show you the way of the dialogic preschool teachers' meetings. So next, I'll show you 2 cases of art workshops. Case 1 is described how the preschool teacher who experiences the imaginative world with children. Case 2 is focused on creating with children and referred to the preschool teacher who proposed actively. So that's about case 1. So this is outline of case 1's art workshop. So style of workshop is children make their own artworks. So invited artists is modeling artists, and the setting year theme is insects of heart. Flow of workshop at August is first thinking about title, so drawing on paper, and making with clay and coloring for lastly presentation. and the title may be changed during the making process. In fact, many children were seen changing their titles. So the target scene is that the girl and the preschool teacher changed the title by thinking about the meaning of the artwork together. The preschool teacher was very interested in the girl's artwork at this point, and asked why she was making this bee with a very long ovipositor. The girl didn't respond immediately, so teacher proposed, let's think some reason. And the teacher listened to her thoughts and as a result changed her original title. The conversation in this scene are shown. Teacher's act words is very important point. The meaning is such this, but in this presentation, I'll focus on this and this point. So the conversation in this first, the teacher was very interested in the girl's artwork and asked the reason. The girl didn't respond immediately and she was silent, but when the teacher rephrased her question, so the girl responded. The teacher thought the girl's work was genuinely interesting and felt the potential that the girl may not yet be aware of and provides clues to explore the meaning of interesting. As a result, the girl has revisited her artwork and has led to verbalization of the reasons. Next, the teacher responded with a surprised expression surprised expression to the answer and showed the understanding of girls' imaginative world. This teacher's understanding is not only girls' problem, but also teacher's own problem. In contrast, approval such as approve the children's idea is focused on understanding the children themselves from outside the imaginative world. On the other hand, this understanding as teacher's own problem is characterized as a directive understanding of the imaginative world. Based on this understanding, the teacher proposed changing the title. The girl also responded to it, and through the conversation, a long narrative title was finally given. This can be seen as the girl's imaginative world being created by the girl and the teacher. At the end of the scene, the teacher proposed further form of artwork from the viewpoint of the meaning of the imaginative world. As a result, at the beginning of this scene, the girl had stopped making artwork, but at the end, she began to make it again. It is considered that the teacher's act provides a clue for the girl to discover the meaning of the imaginative world of her artwork that she was trying to make and argued girl's activity deeper. So the result is so. The preschool teacher experienced the creation of the imaginative world by facing the imaginative world directly, asking the girl about the meaning of the imaginative world, understanding girl's reason, and propose the new meaning of the imaginative world. And this is an attitude in which preschool teacher tries to understand children's imaginative world as teacher's own problem and explore the direction together. And this attitude was characterized as dialogic preschool teacher who experiences the imaginative world with children. So next about the case 2. Next, I'll show you that the preschool teacher who proposes activity is also dialogic. Case 2 art workshop style was collaborative making in class. Invited artist is a graphic artist using printing method, and setting theme is countries of the world, and class theme is Nile River and Egypt. Probe workshop is here, children stamping, and lastly, a very big artwork is made. So the target scene is that the preschool teacher changed the form of the artwork. Children and teachers drawing while exploring the direction of the artwork. This scene was first day of the summer workshop. When the children were stamping motifs such as fish and Nile crocodile on paper, T2 came with the professional artist. T2 saw the children's drawing, and T2 proposed cutting the paper and changing its form. At this time, many children did not show a positive reaction and seemed to be confused, but T2 changed the form of paper actively. So, the meaning of the T2's act was analyzed. T2 was changed by cutting the artwork that the children were making. This was due to the reason that it was not like a river if it is a simple form. This proposal was not expected from the behavior of the children at that time. At first glance, it was an act making by the T2, but it was dialogic in that it was not a proposal that the children had to accept at all. For example, preschool teachers ask children what they think about the information of Nile River and have conversation to deepen their meaning to the artwork. But they are not asking for agreement to T2's action. So T2's proposal was equivalent to the children's proposal. The act of T2 was not a correct answer for T2 either. This act was positioned as a proposal for exploring the imaginative world that was being created. So, T2's proposal was an unexpected proposal for children. For example, the children were just looking, and some children showed their commitment to the work, but at that time they seemed confused, neither agreeing nor denying T2's act. And unexpected proposals provide children with clues as to the direction of the imaginative world they want to create. Kids' act is truly characterized as re-questioning for their imaginative world. And when the activity proposal was dialogic, it was characterized by listening to the children's potential in the imaginative world they were trying to create, which they might not yet be aware of. So, lastly, I will summarize this study. Dialogic preschool teachers try to understand the imaginative world on their own problems and actively propose to the imaginative world in order to experience and explore it with the children. Preschool teachers who create an imaginative world with children are listeners of the possibilities of the imaginative world who act actively as equivalent existence with the children. So, my presentation is finished. Thank you for your listening.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll just make a short summary. Ногучи Саки сказала, что игра, она рассматривала проблему игры, детской игры в детском саду, и сказала, что игра – это взаимодействие с разными людьми и вещами, которые обогащает человека, творит воображаемый мир. В центре этой педагогики дошкольной должен быть ребенок, и она основывается на этой триаде Миядзаки: воспитатель, дети и воображаемый мир. Причем воспитатели и дети имеют равные права. В общем-то, воспитатель переживает воображаемый мир с детьми, и все это она рассматривает на примере мастер-класса по художественному воспитанию, точнее серии мастер-классов по художественному воспитанию с детьми 5 лет, где участвовали профессиональные художники вместе с ними. И, в общем-то, в этом соединении игры и искусства она пытается обнаружить какие-то основания для инновационной педагогики. И рассматривает два примера, два кейса, два случая. В первом случае воспитатель просто переживает с детьми воображаемый мир, в общем-то, пытается объяснить этот детский воображаемый мир в каких-то своих целях. А во втором случае воспитатель сотрудничает, выступает сотворцом и не пытается подвести ребенка к какому-то конкретному пониманию, к тому, чтобы ребенок согласился с определенным мнением, да, заранее известным, а делает сам какие-то предложения, такие же, как и предложения самих детей. В общем-то, они могут быть неправильными, но тем не менее он при помощи этих разных неожиданных предложений выступает в качестве сотворца этого мира. Если коротко, то примерно так. And please, if you have some questions, just a short question, maybe a technical question, yes? So, what do you think should be a number of children, yes, to collaborate with them? So what is the best number? So how many children should be for one teacher, yes? Because if there are too many children, maybe it will not work, yes? Or maybe the more the better.
Children's number?
Yes, what do you think is optimal number of children? I mean, when the group is too big, maybe it would be difficult for a teacher to communicate with them. When it is too small, maybe also, I don't know. So what do you think is the optimal number? And how many children you had in your workshops?
Yes, so in Japan, Japanese kindergarten, one class is children is about 25 or 25 or 30 like this. And this workshop, in this workshop, in each class there are 3 or 4 teachers. because the workshop is the main event of this kindergarten. So in the many teachers were here as so okay. And so
okay, thank you. I'll translate it if you're not against. So, значит, Саки Нагучи сказала, что в детских садах в Японии обычно, например, 25 человек в группе, и при этом вот в этих уроках, в этих мастер-классах присутствовало обычно 3-4 учителя, ну, точнее, художника, да, которые работали вместе с детьми, то есть вот на 25 человек 3-4 учителя. Да, вопрос был о том, сколько человек, в общем-то, примерно оптимальное число детей при такой методике. Okay, thank you very much. Maybe somebody else have some questions?
Yeah, please, Tina.
Thank you.
Yes, Tina, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for your talk. It's very interesting. And the result of the teacher 2, the example with teacher 2, I'm reflecting that how can you differ an authoritative way from an authoritative kind of reaction from the teacher from a dialogic one. There's an article from Scott and Mortimer and Aguiar from 2006 that's titled "The Tension Between Authoritative and Dialogic Discourse, a Fundamental Characteristic of Meaning-Making Interactions," and this is in high school science lessons, but it doesn't matter really. And they are trying to find out how to at school, when you have a curriculum and standards that you have to make the students understand, that you have this problem with the orthodoxy. What does the orthodoxy of the discipline says, and how to make the lesson dialogic and on the students' perspective. So they are sort of discussing how can we balance this. And my question to you is, it must be the reaction from the children that is the interpretation of what the teacher is doing when she is changing the river, right? Or what do you think? How can you deal with this in your interpretation?
Yes, so of course this case and the other case also shows teacher's proposal is is only propose if children not adapt and some children adapt. Is it okay? So teacher proposal is not the correct one. Teacher's thinking so too. So children's is the other case. Some children not adapt teachers propose, and some children adapt a part of teachers propose. So it is okay, because the right of the imaginative world is equal. Teacher thinks so. So the right is equivalent. When the right became equivalent, the making scene became dialogic, I think. So.
Вопрос был о том, как различаются между собой вот авторитарный стиль поведения и идеологический стиль поведения. но и ответ касался того, что вот в идеологическом стиле поведения от воспитателей исходит просто какое-то предложение, которое дети могут, в общем, с которым дети могут не соглашаться, с которым дети могут соглашаться, в общем, как они хотят. И это видно во время этого занятия. То есть, если это просто предложение, то некоторые дети с этим соглашаются, некоторые от этого отказываются. И в этом случае видно, что у воспитателей, у детей равные права, что они на равных участвуют в творении этого воображаемого мира. Thank you. Okay, does anyone have some more questions? Or we will proceed, yes, we will continue with our presentations.
Mm-hmm. Okay, then our final presenter, Onodera, please.
Moment. Okay, now mic is on. Actually, Kyo called me Onodera, but also my name is Watanabe, so you can use both. Well, it's not a problem, but I just want to tell. Okay. So my name is Ryoko Watanabe from Hamamatsu Gakuin University. What I'm going to talk about is today is how the occupational therapist can create a dialogic environment with the people with dementia while he or she actively participates in it as a dialogic author. Especially, I will focus on the therapist's thoughts toward creating dialogue. Let's start with a brief explanation of dementia and the importance of the relationship. In dementia care, many studies have shown that people with dementia are sensitive to the relationship with others, including the therapist. Moreover, the relationship with the therapist mentally and physically affects their performance. So establishing a good relationship is the key to improving their quality of life. On the other hand, some studies demonstrate that in the caregiving relationship, give and take is difficult to achieve, where there is a loss of shared meaning from cognitive decline, and the people with dementia are unable to easily negotiate the terms of the relationship as an equal partner. Then, how can therapists construct a reciprocal and meaningful relationship with the people with dementia? To examine the question, I think Bakhtin's theory of polyphonic or dialogic author offers applicable suggestions. For example, people are basically active respondents to others' voices, and people are basically active respondents to others' voices. And in the polyphonic novel, several consciousness meet as equals and engage in a dialogue that is in principle unfinalizable. The work of polyphonic or dialogic author is to create a world in which many disparate points of view enter into dialogue. And in a quite distinct role, he himself participates in that dialogue. Applying Bakhtin's idea of dialogue to dementia care and based on my previous studies, I think the following connected hypothesis is possible. As a dialogic author, the therapist tries to listen and respond to the possible voices of people with dementia, to participate in the dialogue as equal, and to create possible and positive voices for the people. In this research, especially I focus on the therapist's thoughts behind being a dialogic author rather than his everyday interaction with the people, which I previously analyzed. To examine this hypothesis, I formulated my research questions as follows. First, how the therapist listens to the people's voices and create dialogue and dialogic relationships with them. Second, what is the meaning of dialogic author in dementia care? The research site was a nursing home for the elderly in Japan. The home provided short-time physical rehabilitation for about 100 residents and visitors. In the home, 3 occupational therapists and 1 care worker simultaneously provided therapy in the therapy room. Here, I focused on one experienced occupational therapist, Mr. Junichi Kawaguchi. He is well known for creating drama plays with handicapped people, including children and elderly people. In that home, he organized group and face-to-face activities. To conduct my research, I observed and videotaped the therapy sessions and interviewed Mr. Kawaguchi over the period of 2 years. The recordings were transcribed and analyzed to see what kind of interactions, including dialogue, were produced, and what the therapist thought of his practice in difference to Bakhtinian approaches to narrative analysis. For ethical considerations, all participants, including the therapists and caregivers, elderly clients, and their families, granted permission for the implementation of the study. Full names were not used except for Mr. Kawaguchi. Now I'm going to look at the results of my research. I found the following 3 key thoughts behind his therapeutic interventions, which made his approach successful in creating a dialogic environment. He sees an occupational therapy as a job of eliciting people's reactions and confronting people with dementia, and he tries to correct experiences rather than the correct answers. Let me explain in detail. First, Kawaguchi sees his job as eliciting people's reactions. Here, he talks about his perspective on the expressions in people with dementia and the importance of reacting to them as a therapist. Sorry, I have a small problem with using Zoom. Okay. So what we can give back to the persons is the key. It's the job of making reactions. It's not anything like the job of taking actions, but the job of offering reactions. Then what shall we do with unresponsive people? Well, if they don't react at all, I think if you look at them closely, they surely express something. You can realize this ability to sense it matters. I hope the therapists develop it because they are alive and breathe, or at a minimum. The respiration rate, heart rate, and blood pressure can be their expressions. In fact, some people can only express themselves in such ways. During a lifetime, they can express themselves, they are alive, even the person without words can express and you can see it. Still, in human communication, people demand words. That's why they see no reaction and no expression in persons. But I feel compelled to catch, interpret, and give them a voice because they can't speak. As this excerpt shows, he sees the people as active respondents to others with their own expressions, and that's why he hopes to realize and react to them. Like the idea of dialogic author in Bakhtin, Kawaguchi tries to listen to the people's voices still weak, ideas to yet fully emerged in the therapy sessions. Second, Kawaguchi described his job not as controlling people with dementia, but as confronting them as equals. Considering therapists or care professionals, it is believed that they want to control or manipulate a person at any rate, but it's totally wrong. After all, it is all about expressing, catching, and reacting. That's all. In doing so, the unexpected happens. but we also accept it and react it to again. It's just like a real fight or one-to-one fights. One mistake and it would be all over. Without expressing ourselves, we can't elicit what they have in themselves. Yeah, we need to confront them with our own naked selves. Otherwise, they don't express themselves. That is human nature, isn't it? In the excerpt 2, Kawaguchi expressed his idea that therapist's job is not to control the people, but to accept the unexpected situations which he doesn't anticipate, to encounter the people with dementia as a whole person and treat them as equals. As a dialogic author confronts his characters as equals, Kawaguchi meets the people who have unique voices without acting as authority. In the following excerpt 3, he taught that what is right should be decided by collecting as many as possible individual case experiences rather than collecting the specific cases as the right answers. Here, I will sum up what he taught in this excerpt to clarify his meanings. He mentioned that each case is unique and we don't know the right answer straight away. That's why we need to share experiences, look at successfully and unsuccessfully cases to learn from them. Also, often the most senior coworkers with most experience decide what to do, but it is the discussion of the client's reaction to our suggestions that is the key to collect and exchange experiences between the therapists. In other words, we, the therapists, gradually find out the best approach and become high average hitters, but even low hitters' experience shouldn't be dismissed. In the excerpt 3, Kawaguchi mentioned that only the clients know what the right answer is for them, and each case is unique. And therefore, it's better to avoid collecting the correct answers and to exchange case experience between therapists. Seeing caring as an unfinalizable attempt to collect the experiences with other therapists, it seems that he works as a dialogic author who listens to various voices from them and positions himself as equals. Actually, in my observation, he sought the ideas from the other therapists and clients and adopted some of their ideas when his therapeutic interventions didn't work with the person with dementia. To conclude, as a dialogic author, the therapist tries to listen to the possible voices of people with dementia, to confront them as equals, and to create a dialogic relationship with them and other therapists. Dementia care can be seen as a creative and collaborative process in which the people's new voices are mutually explored and constructed. Being a dialogic author, the therapist actively questions his own thoughts and learns from others' perspectives as voices. Okay, that's all I have to say. So thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Рёко Ватанабе из университета Хамамацу, Гакуин, yes? Она рассказала нам о использовании идеи Бахтина в лечении деменции, рассказала о практиках заботы, о равноправном диалогическом отношении, о попытках терапевта добиться полифонии как основания для такого незавершимого диалога разных сознаний. Она сказала, что терапевт пытается слушать и отвечать на вопросы человека с деменцией, и для того, чтобы обосновать свое мнение, она провела исследование в доме престарелых в Японии. Она транскрибировала, рассмотрела видеозаписи занятий терапевта господина Кавагучи и проанализировала нарративы этих занятий и сделала вывод определенный, что для терапевта вот в рамках этой методологии прежде всего важно получить реакцию, это самая первая задача, даже если человек не реагирует как-то словесно, если он молчит, все равно какие-то есть определенные реакции организма, которые можно рассматривать как ответ, как диалогический ответ на какие-то действия, не манипуляции, на какие-то действия терапевта. Во-вторых, необходимо как бы стоять лицом к лицу, встать лицом к лицу с человеком с деменцией. Терапевту необходимо выражать свое «я», то есть не пытаться кого-то контролировать или кем-то манипулировать, а необходимо относиться к больному человеку как к равному. И далее необходимо получать опыт, прежде всего, а не правильные ответы. То есть нет необходимости подводить этого человека к каким-то правильным конвенциональным ответам. Нам нужно получить от него реакции, и эти реакции раскрывают какой-то совершенно уникальный опыт его существования на пороге. Вот при помощи анализа этих реакций терапевт, он может, в общем-то, каким-то образом выработать тактику правильного лечения. И с этой точки зрения лечение деменции – это не просто какой-то технический процесс, это процесс полностью творческий, это процесс, основанный на сотрудничестве, а терапевт выступает в качестве автора. Вот, если коротко. Thank you very much. So please, questions. Thank you for your very, very interesting report. So waiting for the questions. Just a very short question. Yes. So what is the main difference between this therapy and educational practices? Yes, therapeutic practices and educational practices.
For the occupational therapist, or in general in our discussions, which one?
No, I mean, so is the methodology is the same, yes, for educational practices and therapeutic practices. So what would you say is the biggest problem here, yes, in this methodology, therapeutic methodology? So what are the biggest problems you face? So what are the differences? So maybe methodology can be changed, yes, should be changed in this situation for some reasons, yes? Or the methodology should be the same. It's like everywhere in all the cases it is the same. Okay, do you hear me? I don't know. I know.
Between the therapeutic situation and the educational situation, I can see many similarities actually. Because therapists work as a teacher, a so-called teacher or runner with people with dementia. I mean, also they try to listen to many persons and other therapists, and they also collaboratively learn from each other with listening to each voice. So in a sense, methodology, maybe you are asking about methodological things, but as a main idea, I can see many similarities between education and caring situation. Is it okay, or maybe I made a mistake? What do you think?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your answer. Okay, so maybe there are some questions or comments. Please, you're welcome. Tina said, thank you very much for an interesting talk.
Thank you.
Okay, in the chat, as I can see. So, Maybe some more comments? Okay, okay, thank you very much. It was very interesting.
Excuse me,
Seems Tajima-san, please.
Sorry.
Yes,
Sorry.
yes, it was very interesting.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
please.
My name is Atsushi Tajima, working at the Tokyo University, and I was so impressed at the wonderful framework applying the Bakhtin's polyphony of the therapeutic communication with the dementia. And I understand your application is very reasonable for me, because the talk of the therapist is wavering from A to B, or correct or incorrect, or so there his talk sounds me like a wavering between the hypotheses, not the right answer, not the right responses, but he is seeking the hypothesis reasonably, it's suitable for the situation in the relationship between the therapist and the clients. So I have two questions on your presentations. One, what is the difference between the dialogical therapists, as like Mr. Kawaguchi, and the monologic therapists in the dementia, in the care of the dementia? And second, the dialogic therapists as a polyphonic author must have much stress dealing with the clients in comparing to the monologic therapist, I guess. So what is the motivation or energy of being a polyphonic therapist in your case with Mr. Kawaguchi? This is my question. Very interesting. Thank you.
Okay,
thank you for your very interesting questions. Okay, first one, differences between the dialogic therapist and if there are such kind of people, monologic therapists. And I think it's quite difficult to identify real monologic therapist, because in the therapy there are many biases. But in my context, in my research context, I can say that if the therapist tries to find one correct answer, he or she can be monologic, or because he or she tried to just focus on the one right answer to find the person's voices. Yes. And the second one, about the stress. I haven't checked it yet, but many people ask me the question, why Kawaguchi is like this? Why Kawaguchi is being a dialogic author? It's still kind of mystery for me, because he is really motivated to being a dialogic. Yes, also everywhere. So, but I think he, as we discussed before with Tina's question, he is very careful to listen others' voices. And I mean, his way of learning from others is really suggestive. Yes, mm-hmm. Yes. So also this is one of my research targets is to how he can learn from others. His teaching and learning process is one of my key points in my research. And I think this focus is to clarify what you meant, why he doesn't have stress, or why his stress is so low, something like that. Yeah.
Very interesting. And short questions on the previous questions. how can he deal with the BPSD clients? Because the BPSD clients moves from a normal cognition to the dementia cognition, and they have a much fear or stress, changing a very changing symptom in the very beginning of the deep dementia. It would be a very serious problem, but it would be a great idea for BPSD problems to be a dialogic therapy. Therapy. So let me hear your questions on the BPSD.
It's a bit difficult for me to answer because I haven't asked Kawaguchi about his experience of BPSD clients. But yes, but sometimes he, once he talked about young persons with dementia, and Kawaguchi really care about him because he is really understand what is going on with him, but also he has to accept the situation. And I think we didn't have much time to talk about with this issue, but I think Kawaguchi is always think that when I am like him, because he treated the person as equal. So he always think like this. He said that he can't stand it. So this is really big. I think this way of thinking, his thinking maybe is one of the point to understand his interaction, yes, with such kind of people.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I add something? Professor Tajima's second question really motivated me to extend his question not only to the therapist but the teachers. As far as I understand, the teachers I know who I thought that I think that they are dialogic, is very motivated, and reason is that when you are monologic, as Tina correctly said, listening questions in other person is difficult. But so for such kind of monologic teachers, when someone says something wrong, they must be stressed. Oh, I have to teach something correct. What can I do? How to I teach in what way, especially in the so-called actual learning style in these days. But once after the teacher knows that there's something always intellectual, very interesting thing is in what the student says, they can enjoy students' wrong answers or funny answers. Oh, what are they doing? There must be something interesting. And they can ask children, what are you thinking? So they can enjoy that experience, collaborating with the students from their seemingly wrong answer. So there must be some, similarities maybe between the situation between the education and the therapies.
Wonderful.
Thank you anyway. Long time no see.
Okay, thank you very much. And we have a question from Professor Carol Emerson.
Yeah, please.
As I see. So please, Carol. Do you hear
Thank you. Thank you. I was very interested in this connection between therapy and education, especially if it's therapy for dementia. Because it seems that some patients and some students want a monologic answer to things. That is, a dialogic situation creates a certain tension, expectation, and will trigger anxiety and fear. So how does one, as a dialogic therapist or teacher, deal with this problem of monologism being a more restful and secure position for the other party?
Onora-san, you can answer first.
Yes, I will answer first. I just want to show one conversation with Mr. Kawaguchi and the patient. Because of the time, I haven't shown it, but okay, this one.
Oh, that's wonderful. Oh, yes.
Yes, as you said, it is really happening in the care situation that persons with dementia are very, not how to say, negative somehow about themselves and try to keep it as there. So the therapist's work is to change it. So this is a conversation. Yes, this is also conversation with Mr. Kawaguchi and the person with severe dementia, Mrs. N, H. So as you see, the person continuously tries to tell she has a negative image of herself, but Kawaguchi tried to change it with changing questions and changing the expressions, and also try to show this we are equal, as we are stand as equal, because you can see the last answer from him. Yes, it's true that everyone will die when the person asks, I will die. But they will smile. So his interaction always is actually very positive, and to be a dialogic therapist, as Kiyotaka Miyazaki said, we have really, in some way, we are really motivated to make people happy.
Right. Yes, that's very good. That's very good. To be very positive, but also to be realistic.
Yes.
If you're going to die, I'm going to die too. We're all going to die. Yeah. No, that's wonderful. Thank you. That's very helpful.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we all will die. Okay. So I just also wanted, maybe it's not the question connected with your topic directly, but you know that Bakhtin was also author of books about laughter, carnival, about sense of humor. And so the question is, you're talking mostly about polyphony, dialogue, novelistic therapy. But I would like to ask you, so can you use those ideas about laughter, about sense of humor in like therapeutic tools?
Yes, sure. Yeah, I totally agree with that. But today I just want to talk about the polyphonic polyphonic dimension of the therapist interaction. That's why I didn't use these ideas, but actually I think I can apply these Bakhtin's ideas.
Yes, so
this concept of love and I cannot deal with this concept, but to my research theoretically. But my experience tells me that when the teacher can listen to the voices or the questions in the seemingly wrong or funny or unreasonable responses, and once someone pointed out, oh, your utterance might look funny, but actually it's so interesting in such and such a way, then people can laugh, sometimes really laugh. Oh, for example, Mr. A again said something funny, but again, he said very, very important. I have a lot of experience of this. So maybe we can put this concept into our theory, but I have not yet about that.
Я немножко коротко переведу. Тут была небольшая дискуссия о том, Кэрол Эмерсон задала вопрос о том, как вообще бороться с монологизмом, потому что часто сами обучающиеся или больные, в общем-то, для них это проще и легче, чтобы им дали какой-то правильный ответ, чтобы они, в общем-то, не участвовали ни в чем, и поэтому необходимо каким-то образом вот с этим монологизмом справиться. И вот один из вариантов ответов на это был тот, что нам показали диалог о том, что необходимо каким-то образом раскрыть этого человека, больного или обучающегося. И возможно, что одним из путей этого может быть смех, чувство юмора, которое вот открывает, да, ведет к раскрытию человека. Okay. Thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah,
I
please.
have
Please.
small, but maybe important questions, especially for Dr. Emerson, because I love your books dealing with stressing on the joyful air and rootlessness of the wise fools or log fools and crowns as a dialogical learner. I guess attitude of dialogical therapists of Ryoko Watanabe was like a wise fools, because he has a wide range of motivations, and of course they have a professional knowledge, but he do not root it hardly on this context, his context of profession. So he's listening to the reaction of the therapist. My wonder for a long time, how can we promote such a attitude of joyful air and the curiosity for opening the uncertain sphere of learning? Because as you mentioned, many students love to receive the monologic answers, uncovering the anxiety of exploring the new things. So I guess it would be some technique or some special intervene to promote such a motivation to be a wise fool, or joyful examinations or dialogue, participating in the dialogue. How do you think about that, Dr. Emerson? Sorry, you are on mute.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yeah. Yes, thank you.
Yes.
This is a wonderful question, and I am very interested too how these carnival and jester fool characters can play any role in an educational system that grants degrees, insists upon a hierarchy. You see, education is different than therapy. And education expects that students progress through a hierarchy. They have to acknowledge the authority of a teacher. That means the teacher must, I believe, take into consideration the expectation of the students. Now, a therapy relation is somewhat different. And I loved the understanding of therapy as a conversation where people are by definition equal. In Bakhtin's carnival, everybody is a fool. And if you are an authority figure, you're negative. That model cannot be moved into education directly. So directly. I believe not directly, but I think a great deal can happen one-on-one with teachers and students. It's very difficult in a collective situation. And carnival is an entirely collective economy where real teaching is one-on-one. And it's that one-on-one relationship where teaching resembles healthy therapy. And that's why we can't entirely outsource everything in terms of collectivized models. We have to continue to try to be therapists to ourselves and to our students. But the question's a wonderful one because laughter clears up a great deal. Laughter creates a sense that nobody is guilty, that nobody is a loser, that everybody brings an individual strength to a situation. Those are wonderful learning potentials, individual strength. So That's about all I can say on that, but it's a very stimulating question, what to do with the monologically oriented student.
Okay, thank you. And Tina wants to give some comments, I think, yes?
Yes, thank you, Carol. It's very interesting. I was just thinking of the issue yesterday. We were talking about what to do with education, as Matusov talked about yesterday. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking we could get as far as to maybe take the carnivalistic fool, so that the students and the teacher themselves can recognize the authority when they are very authoritative as a fool. If you insist on having this perspective on learning only, you might be a fool. So I don't know.
I think that's absolutely correct. That's absolutely correct. That one of the things that defines a fool is a certain sort of clever practicality. Buffoons and fools are very much in this world. In Bakhtin's world, a buffoon and a fool are adaptable, clever. That's why they're comedy. Tragic characters are very stiff, stable, very principled, and they lose. They all end up dead. Comic characters always win. They don't win on an established hierarchy, but they always remain alive, and somebody is pregnant at the end. Something is giving birth at the end. This is a wonderful scenario. And even a person with dementia can give birth. It does not depend upon your physical apparatus, but you have to persuade the person that they are a source and not only a ruined site. And I think students also need that reassurance, but they also have to be able to accept authority in some way. Yeah, exactly.
Could I jump in for a brief comment?
Yes, Dennis, yes.
Yes, please.
I wonder if it's important. It's a wonderful discussion here, and extremely meaningful for all of us who teach. I wonder if it's important to remember that the carnival that Bakhtin talks about is a medieval carnival. And it is often a false sense, I think, that we get that all there is in a medieval metaphysic is a carnival. But Bakhtin reminds us that carnival is a seasonal thing. He relies on the cultural phenomena that was a carnival in the medieval Europe, or medieval Christian medieval metaphysic. He tells us a few things that are important. He even uses Latin phrase which sounds rises pascales, right? This is a Paschal carnival. It's a seasonal carnival that happened around sort of the Easter celebration of the church. And if we visualize this, then we have to remember that it happens in a very particular place in a medieval town, on a square, where you have the church right there standing. The church, it's a season where the church sort of grows silent, but it doesn't disappear. You know, it does not go somewhere. It's there. Basically, what I'm trying to point out here is that the medieval carnival relies on the existence of not simply a hierarchy, but a very strict, a very serious hierarchy, which it does not dismiss. And there is a certain symbiotic relationship. And this kind of freedom that is possible within the carnival, at least to me, seems to need that metaphysical structure. One thing that is interesting about the medieval metaphysical structure is that its source of authority is never reduced to a teacher.
Oh, yes.
Right? That is, when a teacher speaks authoritatively, a teacher is never speaking from him or herself, nor does the teacher expect a student to become a source of authority. That is, they all can somehow rely on authority without that authority ever becoming their direct responsibility. And I think that's where the anxiety potentially in the modern era that we live in, the post-romantic or romantic era that has reduced metaphysical burden onto an individual, which the individual could not ever sustain, and therefore caved in, and the current psychological, how do I put it mildly, the psychological meltdown that the maternity represents, both in the classroom and outside of the classroom, has something to do, I think, with the loss of that symbiotic relationship between carnival and a certain freedom that's possible there, and its reliance on pretty rigid structures of meaning, sort of sacramental. There were sacramental ideas, sacramental notions that could not be challenged a priori. That, I guess, brings me even closer to asking whether we can think Bakhtin within the sentimental metaphysic that I think the modern university exists in. So it's a bit of my own rambling thinking, and obviously open to your critique. I would love to hear what you think about that. Thank you.
I think that's a spectacular contribution, Denis. I'll only say one thing about why it's so good. We don't understand that to enable a person dialogically requires a framework where not all the authority of culture devolves into that single person. Not only is that untrue, it's unmanageable in any institution. Mm-hmm. And the public square with carnival at one end and the church that is there, believed in, and never goes away, that mm-hmm. is a medieval metaphysic which perhaps is unable to reproduce either in a hospital or in a university. What do people think about that?
Yeah. Say it.
We also have one more question, I think, from Sergei Sandler. Yes, but we have 10 minutes left, please. Yes.
Let me make sure you're hearing me. Yes, thanks. I'd like to take issue with Denis's reading of Carnival, though. In a sense, I think, Denis, I would say you're having it backwards, right? First of all, yes, the church is right there in the public square, and the carnival actually is going on inside the church, especially the Risus Paschalis, right? And Risus Natalis, the laughter for Easter and for Christmas. It is also going on around the square. It is also going on, actually the word carnival itself refers to celebrations that are happening in the post-medieval period, in the Renaissance, even in the early modern period, up to and including the 19th century. Bakhtin is including in his discussion also descriptions of carnivals in Rome by Goethe in the late 18th century, by, I think, Dietrich, one of his German sources, in the late 19th century, in the 1890s. That's part of the, on the other hand, he has pre-medieval sources, Saturnalia. Now, yes, Bakhtin speaks about carnival as pretty violently responding to hierarchies, as overturning them, relativizing them. But I think if you read Bakhtin carefully, you'll see that he doesn't believe carnival is dependent on the existence of a hierarchy. He does believe carnival represents some element or some elemental force that that has resisted hierarchy before it formed, in a sense. Now, how that translates into the possibility of how doing something in an educational setting is a whole different question. But I can say from personal experience as a high school teacher here and there way back, carnival happens in high schools or in other schools. It happens. Perhaps some of my most vivid experiences with actual carnival laughter were during a break where high school students, and they're all, it's a high school that collects folks thrown out of the school system because they don't fit in and they don't have good enough grades and have like criminal cases and whatnot. And the sort of carnival staging that I saw, including everything, parody of official ceremony, speech of like joyous play with life and death around seeming trifles. It was all there, right? And it happens. It didn't happen as part of the educational process per se. It happened in the school, though. I think I don't know if you want to harness it at all.
Yeah.
Maybe you want to get harnessed by it instead.
Yeah.
Carol, do you have some response? Because you put your hand on now.
Maybe I could come back really quickly, hopefully within a minute.
Yeah.
Wonderful comment, Sergey. I think it's one of those in Bakhtin where we could argue forever. It just depends on how you're going to see it, essentially. I happen to see that that there is a symbiotic relationship and a legitimate sort of the medieval metaphysics stance. There's a legitimate one. I liked your comment about sort of the broader coordinates of the medieval period or of the carnivalistic period that exists in Bakhtin. I do think, however, that it's the medieval carnival is the principal idea of the carnival there, even if Bakhtin basically is trying to say that carnival is has always existed. What I liked is your final comment about the high school, and I want to say that that's the whole point, Sergey, is that carnival might still happen in a high school, but it no longer happens in colleges, and that's there seems to be an important distinction about maybe the age or the way authority still functions on that level, and what happens to idea of authority. And by authority, I don't really mean necessarily administrative authority, even though it is an outgrowth of physical authority, but more on the level of authority of knowledge, that is of such basic notions as truth,
and still
something
humor
that we have given up in a postmodern world, but something that at least at some point in history, certainly Western history, did exist. So I have no final sort of take on this. It just seems to be to me that we have to remember that carnival exists in some kind of relationship to a hierarchy, that it's not entirely absent for Bakhtin.
Thank you very much. Okay, with big pleasure, I should say, yes, that it was very interesting and inspiring session, but with big regret, I should say that we don't have more time. So maybe Professor Kiyotaka Miyazaki will say some words, yes, to finish it.
Yes, as the organizer of the symposium, I have to say thank you for all the audience, and especially the organizer, not organizer, but administrator. But I have to say, finally say, at least on this symposium, for this concept carnival, my intuition says that this carnival idea relates in education, especially how to set the goal of the education, not the big system of education, but each class. Any theorist, even dialogist, want to set some kind of theoretical goal, or to, for example, to make the class dialogic, to make the carnival. I think that these won't work. will not work. All the research, all the practitioners I know had this attitude, enjoy this moment. And teachers enjoyed moment by listening new ideas from the children. As I said, the wrong answer is not the wrong, but reasonable and have some meaningful question. So teachers can learn, so teachers can enjoy. Only such kind of attitude would finally make the class dialogic. But setting the goal, like making it dialogic, making it the carnival, won't work. That's my belief. Anyhow, it's only 1 minute left. So thank you for everyone to participate to our poor symposium. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you so much.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
So we have session. In 1 minute, we have next plenary session.
Okay.
So
then